There was a moment in my awakening process when I heard the word cult. And of course, as a Jehovah's Witness, you do not believe you're in a cult. Cults are usually some small group that lives in the middle of nowhere and they're following this one guru and they're all hoping, to go to heaven thanks to this guy that will tell you, the recipe to salvation. That was my idea of a cult. I had no idea that cults are a much more spread out, and there's so many out there, and there are new ones being formed as we speak. As a matter of fact, people are forming cults, creating cults without knowing they're creating cults. That's I think that's the worst part of it. They're trying to control others, and they're doing the undue influence techniques without even knowing they're doing this. And I think Jehovah's Witnesses are a perfect example of it. They don't know they're in the cult. They are going door to door. They're spreading what they believe is true. Then they're using the techniques that they have been taught by somebody else. They go teach this to others from the platform, from door to door, through the Bible study, even in their own homes. And they're following a specific pattern that is recognizable only to those who left, only those who can go through it, leave the organization, look at certain pattern of behaviors, and then recognize, oh, now I understand. So in this process of discovering what's right, what's wrong with Jehovah's Witnesses, I came across this absolutely brilliant man, Stephen Hassan. He wrote a book, Combating Cult Mind Control. And before I read this, I'm like, there's no way Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. There's just no way. I mean, I've been in it. I'm happy. There is, nobody's forcing me. It was my decision, my choice. And anybody can walk away anytime they want. Okay, this fellowshipping and this, that doesn't mean you're in a cult. No. But he wouldn't leave me alone. I was like thinking, if I were in a cult, how would I know? Nobody that is in a cult believes that there are cults. So if I'm in one, that how would I know? I thought about it for a second and I realized, well, it's very easily to prove that I'm not in a cult. All what I have to do is do a test. I went online, I Googled it. Am I in the cult? Here's a test. And I started answering the questions. And as I'm answering the question, it's like, yes, 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 yes. Holy crap. yes. And I scored like, I remember it was like 83% or something like this. And anything above 75% was you are in high controlling cult. And it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking for me because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the mind control techniques. And it's interesting when you're in it, you always look for excuses to say why you're not in the cult because, for you, the idea or the definition of a cult is different than somebody else. And it's not a simple definition and it's not a simple thing to recognize. What I love about this book is that he basically explains how cults work, how does the undue influence works. He was in one as well, and he helped a lot of people to recognize the patterns of behavior, the mind controlling habits that people who are under the undue influence unfortunately become victims of. I strongly recommend to read it. He's not paying me to promote this book. This is out of my own doing because I simply gained so much value out of this book and out of his work that I want to share to others and make other people aware of what this guy did. Around the year 2020, when the whole COVID hit and everybody was stuck at home, I'm like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to get this guy on an interview. And I was able to get Stephen to sit with us and discuss some of the successes that he had and what was his path. And I'll be happy to share it with you in a second. But what I want to stress for you guys is if you don't believe you're in a cult, do a test. Do a test online. And here's what you can discover that could actually shock you. And something also from Stephen's book. Cults can start with two people, a leader and a follower. And just because you have a leader and just because you have a follower does not automatically mean that you are in a cult, because you can go to work and you have your boss and you're following what the boss says, and that does not mean that you are in a cult. You have to distinguish of what is right definition of a cult, and when is even your employer, your spouse, your friend, your religious leader crossing a line. Crossing a line. How would you know that, oh, this is too far, this is controlling, this is abusive? Because the problem is the line is not written, it's not very clear, and sometimes we allow certain things in our life because we think, I don't have a choice. My boss is telling me to do something, and if I say no, he might fire me. I don't want to be fired, so I'm gonna give in. I'm gonna do what he's telling me to do, even though I don't feel comfortable doing this. It's the same thing in marriage. It's the same thing with your friends. It's the same thing in the religion. And recognizing where the abuse starts, when somebody's crossing a line, is critical. So you might think, oh, I freed myself from Jehovah's Witnesses. Great, congratulations. So many people get involved in other types of organizations just to find out later on that not they can't free themselves easily. I tell you, one of my friends, when I saw her behavior at first, oh, nobody liked her. Seriously, she was connected to our family, and we're watching what's going on, and her behavior was not pleasant. Very few people were happy being around her. And then we saw a transformation like never before, to the point where we thought this person is like a totally new person, totally new person. So loving, so caring, so kind, so giving, so forgiving, that it was almost weird to connect these individuals together. It's like, yeah, that was the same person. uh, for the better. We were, all of us were shocked in a very nice way how nice of a change there was. But at the same time, we felt like, it's just a little bit too nice. That's just a little bit. It's almost like a love bombing. And I'm like, And then we started digging. And we're trying to figure it out what caused all those changes. And then we found out that she got a lot of education from Scientology. And then it was like, boom, 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 red flags, right? But we saw the change for the good. And then later on, she decided to leave, and it was not easy to leave that organization. So you might be involved in some sort of group, some sort of organization, some sort of individual, and you will see benefits in your life for the better, for the better. And they could be enormous, enormous benefits for you. And you might feel good, and you might go in, and you'll think, oh, this is the best thing that happens to me in my life, because I see the benefits of it. And then what happens if you try to leave? What happens if you say, I don't want this anymore? What if you have a different opinion? What if you say no? What if you say, I have my own thoughts about this? I'm gonna take a portion of what you're telling me, but the other thing, it's on me. What if you disagree? What happens that? So it's important to recognize those patterns of behavior, because they will tell you usually whether you're involved in some sort of group that is damaging. I always say, if you want to know quickly if the organization you're joining is a cult, it's a controlling one, you will never recognize them by the front door. You will always recognize them by the exit door. And if the exit is not easy, then chances are you're gonna be shunned. I mean, you're gonna be in a controlling group. So I want to take you now to the interview that I had with Stephen. I hope you enjoy it. And there's many things that this man helped many communities, including Jehovah's Witnesses. So please, if you have a chance, read his book, and let me know what you think. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for joining us. We have a super special guest today. Steven Hassan, you are an amazing person who has wrote a book that truly helped me and my wife, because this combating cult mind control is a book written about not only ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Mormons, but a whole bunch of other religious and non-religious groups who are controlling people's minds. And it really, truly helps people to see, to identify first that they're in the cult, which is, for anybody who's in it, almost impossible to identify when they're in it. So please, Stephen, tell us a little bit about your past and your experience, and what was also your experience with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses?
Sure, and thanks for inviting me, Jack. And my last name is pronounced Hassan.
Oh, sorry about that.
For everyone who's heard me on TV shows where the host has mispronounced it and it keeps going. And I guess I want to start by saying I'm 65. I'll be 66 in May. Married for 22 years, 17-year-old son. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Massachusetts. I also have a national certification for counseling. I'm currently in a doctoral program that I'm hoping to finish in this coming year, because I came to realize that after 40 plus years of activism, nothing was changing. And I came to understand that the legal system itself has a very out of date understanding of the human mind. And I'd like to influence the legal system, because then it will influence policy. So that's a big piece of my work. People come to me if they're ex-members and need healing. They've gone to lots of other therapists and they still have some fundamental issues, or they contact me to coach them on how to approach their family members or loved ones who are in cults. So that's kind of how I make my living. And I got interested in this whole thing because when I was 19 years old in 1974, I was recruited into a friend group of the Moon cult, the Moonies. And if you don't know what the Moonies are, they're most well known for their mass weddings. And Moon has the Guinness Book of World Records. He married 30,000 couples at one time.
Wow.
All of members, and the men line up there and the women there, and he goes, you and you, you and you, you and you, and you have 5 minutes to decide if the Messiah should choose who you marry. And of course, everybody accepts, with very rare exceptions. And then you're separated from your spouse for, the average is 4 years, and then they tell you what sexual positions are okay and which ones are not okay, etc. Moon claimed to be 10 times greater than Jesus Christ. He wanted to take over the world. Democracy was satanic. And I was being groomed to be a top leader in the cult. And I was very fanatical, actually. I got out after I fell asleep at the wheel of a van driving 80 miles an hour.
Whoa.
Into the back of a tractor trailer truck, which led to a hospitalization, which led to a deprogramming that my family arranged to have me sit down with ex-members and learn about Chinese communist brainwashing. Of course, I didn't think I was in a cult. I thought Satan was the god of this world, and we were going to establish the Garden of Eden on earth, where there'd be no crime and no poverty, and everyone would be one with each other. And when I understood Chinese communist brainwashing, the lights started to turn on, and the thing that
I'm sorry.
Hey, Steve, we lost you.
did me. Okay. When did you mute me? Anyway, where did I leave off?
Like 4 seconds ago. You're
Okay.
good.
So yeah, on that last day of my deprogramming, because I had made a deal with my father, he would drive me back to the cult if I wanted to go back, because he just wanted to be reassured that I understood what I was involved with. And I wanted to prove to my parents that I wasn't brainwashed. But I woke up and I realized Moon's a liar. If he's a liar, then I can't trust him. if he's a liar, how can he be a representative of God? Because the God that we taught in the Moonies was a God of truth. And so once I started thinking, he's a liar, he's not trustworthy, he's not God's representative, felt like a house of cards in my mind just started going plop, 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 plop. And I cried for 3 hours. Like, what have I been doing for the last 2.5 years of my life? It was devastating and traumatic for me. And my strategy in 1976 was to start reading books about brainwashing and mind control and persuasion and attitude change, and just really wanted to understand it. I reached out to former military intelligence experts who had studied brainwashing, people like Robert J. Lifton, whose book was used in my deprogramming. And when I met with him, he had a dramatic effect on my life, because he basically said, you know, I just studied this secondhand, but you've lived it. They did it to you and you did it to other people. And what you're describing is so much more sophisticated than what the Chinese were doing in the 50s. You should study psychology and explain it to people like me. And I was a 22-year-old college dropout, like ashamed, embarrassed, confused, with a big cast on my leg from my toes to my groin. And this Yale psychiatrist was telling me I could teach him something valuable. And I was like, ta-da! That's what I want to do. I want to right this wrong. All the people I recruited into the cult, I want to get them out. I want to tell the U.S. government about the Moonies. Like I was so naive that they didn't know about the Moonies. But that's a whole nother saga of my story. I wrote Combating after my master's. My master's thesis was my approach to helping people get out of cults. And a friend of mine who had been in a cult called 3HO, the White Turban, Yogi Bhajan Kundalini Yoga cult, said, oh, I know someone who's a publisher, and gave my thesis to him. He said, write a book, but write it for people with an 8th grade level of education. Like, don't write it academically.
Interesting.
And we scheduled it to come out 10 years after Jonestown. And this was the original cover, which I absolutely hated. And I couldn't talk him out of changing it. I said, it's going to turn off everybody that I know. Like no cult member is going to identify with this picture with a padlock over his ear. And he refused to listen to me. It still sold 15,000. But then we did the paperback in 1990 that was translated into 9 or 10 languages. That one had 2 T's because it had the British spelling. And then in 2014, I bought the rights back to my own book, and I published it with 1 T, and I updated it significantly. So that's my brief. I've been out helping people in trafficking, extremist cults. I've studied hypnosis, social psychology, and now I'm really obsessed with the legal system and how to change the construct of that humans are rational agents, which humans are not rational agents. We're rationalizing agents, but we're not rational, to a more 21st century viewpoint where we know how influenceable human beings are, because we're organic bioorganisms that are deeply socially connected with one another and the internet. So that's my mini speech, Jack.
Wow. Well, you know what? Your story is very inspiring. I think we all learning about other people's experience helps us to understand that, you know, we're not the only ones that went through some crazy experiences, and there are cults out there that are, I think, even more controlling than Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, North Korea comes to mind
As the top one.
Well, it's one of the most obvious extreme, very large, well-funded cults with nuclear weapons, I should add.
Just out of curiosity, if you could put a scale from 1 to 10, and 1 is a very low controlling cult, and 10 is like the most controlling, where would you put Jehovah's Witnesses?
So it's funny you're asking me this. This is part of my doctoral thesis. Does everybody know my influence continuum?
I know that one, yes.
Does
But
everybody who's looking at it? It's on my website, it's in my books. But this is ethical healthy and this is unethical. So you're asking me where on the continuum is the Watchtower. So I put it as 8.5 to 9 out of 10.
Oh, wow. That's pretty high.
And I do that because of the blood transfusion nonsense, their total lack of understanding of what the Torah teaches about blood, for example.
Right.
So many people have died. Their homophobia, their shunning, their pedophilia problem, the traumatizing nature of the cult. I don't put it higher. I definitely, ISIS is much worse. Groups that have members blow themselves up is much worse. Obviously, pimps and traffickers, sex traffickers are horrendous and such. But I definitely am very concerned about the Watchtower as a destructive cult. And I guess I want to add that when my book first came out, the original one, I got a long letter from a former Bethel elder named Randall Waters, who wrote me a letter who said, "I loved your book, but how come you didn't mention the Jehovah's Witnesses?"
Right.
To which I said, "Why should I have mentioned the Jehovah's Witnesses?" And he said, "Are you kidding me? I underlined the entire thing." And I said, "Teach me." He said, "Come to LA. I'll get a gathering of ex-members together and we'll teach you." And I went out to LA and I taught them more about what I knew, and they taught me about the Watchtower. And that was 1989, I think, or 1990. And over the decades, I've just learned so much more horrible things about the JWs.
Right. Oh,
And
wow.
I'll just add, I just finally, because of the quarantine of COVID, I'm exercising at home. In my basement, I have a recumbent bike that I bought when I had cancer 14 years ago. So I brought that out, and I'm catching up on documentaries. And I never watched the Leaving Neverland 4-hour documentary with Michael Jackson and the two men that who were children when he abused them sexually. And it just there's a whole story that needs to be told about Michael Jackson and the Watchtower and pedophilia.
Right.
Because
That's
pedophilias are not born, pedophiles are not born, they're made.
interesting. That story I'm not too familiar with, to be honest with you. So, but it's something to look into. That's
If
definitely
you have HBO, look at Leaving Neverland. It's
Living
4
Neverland.
hours, and then there's an Oprah special with the two men who were then had been children, who had been groomed and indoctrinated and raped by him. And it's a window into the horror show that is the Watchtower.
Interesting. Stephen, I think everybody who wakes up from a cult, one of the first thing they want to do is they want to wake up everybody else. They're like, come on, we've been brainwashed. Let me show you, right? And what are some of the do's and don'ts that you would say to a Jehovah's Witness who woke up but still has family and they want to talk about it? They want help them to understand what's truly going on. They don't know how. And obviously there's a lot of A lot of us made many mistakes. What would you say about the
So before I answer that, Jack, if I may, I'll just say that there are a myriad of different types of mind control cults. There are
Mhm.
religious cults and therapy cults and business cults and political cults, cults of personality where it
Yep.
is a single person who's a narcissist, psychopath that enslaves a person or has a authoritarian family unit that is destructive. Um, so I just wanted to paint a broader picture that we're talking about a phenomenon that is way bigger than just particular institutions. And then I want to say especially with religious cults like the Watchtower, LDS, the Moonies, to name three, um, members are taught to sacrifice themselves for others, to
Mm.
put God first, to go out and proselytize and recruit. So naturally, when you're getting out of one of these groups, you're on automatic pilot. Instead of getting people in, now you want to get people out.
Right.
And I really wanted to like make that really clear that as a mental health professional, this is not a wise strategy. That really you want to take the time to learn and heal first, like
Mhm.
really understand before you start worrying and trying to intervene with others. And because people have this, orientation, um, and then naturally their family and friends who are still in, they want to get them back in the group, so it sets up this horrible triggering encounter triggering thing that is very detrimental to people's well-being.
Mhm.
So, if people are asking me, what should be the sequence of helping loved ones, I would start by saying, have you done your homework? You know, have you learned the intellectual knowledge that you need? Have you done the self work to figure out who you are and what you believe and why you believe it? Which takes effort and it takes time, especially if you're born into a mind control cult where you've been kept from education. So, for example, people born into a group like the Watchtower, they really need to do a survey course on the history of religion, like all religion,
Right.
and be able to put the Watchtower in a bigger context of Christianity, and then look at Judaism and understand Jesus was a Jew and everything that he taught was from that frame. And then to go backward and to understand that there are a lot of very wonderful people out there who don't come from a Judeo-Christian frame,
Yes.
and they're not, going to hell. I mean, Jews don't believe in hell anyway, but and that's the religion of my upbringing. And I know your group doesn't talk about religion, so I'm not going to say anything more. But my point is, before you start trying to get everybody out,
Mhm.
the big mistake is take the book and hand it to a member. Here, read it. It's like the likelihood of it being successful is very low. So that said, and I was talking with you, Jack, before we started, and I asked you if you read this book of
Right.
mine,
Which I
and you
have.
said no. And I said, this is actually the follow-up to Combating for how to help people in cults.
Right.
It's kind of a guidebook. So if you read the original Combating and you haven't read the updated, I recommend read this first. And I don't know if you read the preface, Jack, but I said if you were in a cult, read it twice. Read it
Mhm.
first without thinking of your own involvement. Just read it as a book about my experience in the Moonies and all these other cults,
Right.
and then go through it again and read it and think about your own group, and then start underlining or start pulling out all the parallels, right? And then get to that. Um, okay, that's the warm up to answer your question. Um, Essentially, what I've come to after 40 plus years of doing this work is some pretty um, basic understandings of the do's and don'ts. So first of all, a critical concept is understanding what I refer to as the dual identity model. So I was Steve Hassan, son of Milton and Estelle Hassan. I wrote poetry, I played basketball, I got recruited at 19, and then I became a different person. I became not Steve Hassan, that Steve Hassan. I became a cult member, Steve Hassan. His parents were Sun Myung Moon and Hak Jahan. And in mental health terminology, this is referred to as a dissociative disorder, where there's two Steves,
Right.
the real me and the cult me. And then when I got deprogrammed, the real me popped up, but I still had this indoctrinated me that was still, indoctrinated. Had the phobias, had the loaded language, all the buzzwords of the cult, all the triggers. For example, in the Moonies, part of the teaching is that Satan had sex with Eve and then she seduced Adam. So, as a Moonie, you're totally alienated from all women. Like, women are really evil and they're going to rape you at any moment. So as a Moonie, you could never kiss a woman, hug a woman, be in a room alone with a woman, because women. So it took me a year after I got out of the Moonies, and I was like very clear: Moon's not the Messiah, the divine principle, their Bible was not the truth. But it took a whole year before I could be with a woman and not hear the indoctrination in my head about Satan and the women are trying to steal my spirituality and blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
So it's and with people born into the group, and this was one of the big objections I had with the original combating, was, hey, you got recruited at 19. You had a self. I was born into it. I don't have a self. But what I come to understand from working with so many people who are born into cults is, yes, they do have a self. You're born with it. It's just suppressed.
That's a
And
very
different people have different levels of their real self, rebelling against the group, wanting to do things that are not allowed, wanting to play sports, wanting to have a birthday party. And depending on conditions, the cult self would say, oh, Satan is working on you to break the rules, but it's really your real self wanting to have fun, wanting to be close, to have friends, wanting to be creative. If you happen to be gay, your attraction is not evil. It's like that's your wiring, your genetic wiring. So back to the do's and don'ts. So what I want to say is that helping people get out of a cult is a process. And what I'm advocating is an ethical process that isn't trying to persuade people to be like you. Like, it's very different than when you're in a cult trying to recruit people in, you're trying to make them like a good cult person.
right. Yeah.
With the black and white, all or nothing ideology and the us versus them and all of the fear stuff. What I'm advocating is love, like real love, not conditional love. We'll love you if you study the Bible with us, let us baptize you and do what we tell you to do. No, not conditional love, like appreciating people for who they are, their true self, respecting them, treating them like they're intelligent people, and having a lot of intelligent interactions with them, with the most important technique being asking a good question and then shutting up and being patient and letting them think about it.
Right.
Because a universal mistake, and I have to coach my clients repeatedly about this, is they're very uncomfortable waiting for more than 3 seconds of silence after asking a question. But if you're talking to a cult member and you genuinely are wanting them to start thinking, it takes a lot longer than 3 seconds for
That's right.
people to try to, you know, work through a particular question. And you want to make it safe for them to go inside and think about something. They may not be ready to verbalize it, but you want them thinking about it and such. So I'll give you a quick example. If I ask somebody, tell me what made you decide to join XYZ cult? And they said, well, I went to the workshop and I prayed to God and I asked God to tell me if this, you know, give me a sign, you know, that this is the group that he wanted me to join. And then something happened and I joined. You know, I came to interpret it and I joined. So then I would say, so I'm very interested that was your process. And I'm really curious, if God came to you and you knew it was God, and God told you it was time for you to leave, would you leave?
Oh, that's a very powerful question. Wow, that's a very powerful question. And you wait.
That's 10 seconds. You want to wait 5 minutes or more.
Hmm.
You want people to think about.
Wow, that is a very, and I remember I watched an interview with you with somebody else. It was a while back, it was a few years back. And that's what you mentioned, that when you ask a question, you have to pause, and you have to pause for a long time, because they have to get that themselves. And at the beginning, that was my mistake when I was trying to wake up my wife. I would just tell her stuff, right? And even if I did ask a quick question, then I would right away, you know, come up with an answer, right? But that you taught me that lesson.
Right, but the point is, in my opinion, ethical influence of someone in a mind control cult is really respecting that they have to exit themselves.
Yes.
Versus you persuade them to follow what worked for you.
Right.
And for folks, it's a, you know, very different kind of process they need to go through. But if you love somebody, you'll understand this is not a one punch, you know, knock them out or hit the home run, you know, run around the bases and you win the game. No. This is human beings who, you know, feel and think, and there's real complexity in terms of how they make sense of the world. And again, I want to come back to it's such a different model than a persuasion model to help people wake up. And it's such a different experience if somebody sees an interview of mine. Maybe they go to a library and they look up combating and they start flipping through it. It's a very different experience than their spouse handing it to them. Read this.
Right.
It's not going to have the same effect, I guarantee you. In fact, it could turn them off for a really long time from actually reading the book.
Right.
Versus, hey, I found this book. It's by this guy. He's in the Moonies. And I looked up the Moonies. What a wacko group that is. You ever hear about the Moonies? Here, look at this video about the Moonies. And then you show the person the thing about the Moonies. It's like, hey, you want to read this with me? We can like read it aloud to each other. And we can talk about it. What do you think? Like, that's a modified version versus I read this book. It saved my life. It turned on, it turned on all my lights. You need to read this.
It doesn't
Careful,
work, right?
careful,
Okay, right.
careful, careful. I talk about a strategic interactive approach. So I've already mentioned the goal is empowering the person to think for themselves and make their own decisions, right? So if you know that's the goal,
Yep.
think about where we are now is I need to develop rapport and trust with the person. I need to ask questions to really understand how they make sense of things, what their construction is in their head. And then I can start doing strategic seed planting or asking more complex questions that will start opening some of the doors. So in other words, the normal way people communicate, especially with family members, is you just say whatever comes into your head. And I'm saying not when you're trying to help somebody think for themselves.
Right.
You want to be strategic. You want to, think to yourself, I'd like to say this to my wife who's in the group still, but if I say it and then you visualize her in the room with you and you say it and then you see her face go, then you go, no, I'm not going to say that. let me try, next interaction, and you
Right.
you keep
Practice, literally
tweaking
practice.
it till you go, oh, she's feeling rapport and trust to me, she's wanting to share her experience with me,
Right.
right? So it's very involved, which is why, even though I've written books about it and I've done videotapes about it, ultimately every case has, in my opinion, should be really customized, because you want to not do any harm. You don't want to cause alienation or fears. And you want to build bridges. You want to create aha moments that help a person feel like there's life outside of the group. In this book, I have chapter 10. I have a list of phobias that I've encountered in my career, and I have 4 pages of phobias that I've come across in all of the groups. Let's see if I can open these, of different
Wow.
phobias. So just to pull some out. Phobias of physical health: die painfully, be murdered, or commit suicide if you leave the cult. Become ill and die of cancer, AIDS, or heart attack. Cause their loved ones to become ill and die by a car, bus, or train, or die in an airplane crash. I've listed them all out, and it almost lets people who are in cults laugh.
Right.
Stereotypical all of these fears are. But the critical thing is realizing that mind control cults program irrational fears in their members' minds, that if they leave, terrible things are going to happen.
Right.
That, in other words, when you're in a mind control cult, you can't imagine being happy and fulfilled out of the group.
No.
But that's a clue as to why former members are so dangerous to cult leaders and to cult organizations, right? They have to demonize the ex-members. Why? Because they're the living counterexample.
Yes.
They're like, hi, Moonies, I am happy. I'm so glad. I have a spiritual life. I am a scuba diver. I write poetry. I travel around the world.
You cannot be real happy.
You like to
You
do that
cannot be real happy. The real happiness only in the Moonies.
Yes, right.
You
So,
think you're happy, but you're not real happy.
so
We're
that
the happy
so I
ones.
talk about thought stopping in my work, but there's also emotion blocking or emotion stopping too, and so you block out negative feelings, right? Because those are satanic or fallen or whatever. Of like, I'm tired, I want to sleep, or I'm homesick. I miss my family, or I miss my friends. And you have to teach yourself with your cult identity to keep, stuffing that down. When you're out and you're living in a healthy way, you have a full access to all your feelings. Your feelings are your friends.
Mm,
Your doubts are your friends. Like
mm,
real faith, if it's spiritual, implies having doubts and
right.
not accepting things 100% of anything.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I love it. Steve, there are some cases where are really, really challenging. And there's tons of people, because I'm a coach and I'm talking to a lot of XJWs. One of the hardest cases is when people are divided in a household. So let's say one wakes up and their spouse doesn't, right? That, do you think, and they never do you think it's possible to have a happy marriage even though two people are thinking so opposite?
What do you think?
I think it's very, very challenging, um, because you cannot truly be authentic. And if you're not
Right.
authentic, if you cannot come home and express your own feelings and your own thoughts freely, then the relationship will never work properly.
Right. So, I mean, I am very biased based on my life experience, and I really believe that people in mind control cults have a cult identity that is toxic and is suppressing their authentic self.
Hmm.
So, and then if you add in children, if you love your kids, why would you want to raise your kids? Allow your kids to be raised in a toxic mind control cult.
Well, this is where it's another level of challenge, right? So let's say you have children, and that was my challenge at the beginning when I was trying to wake up my wife. My wife was like, no, 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 I don't want anything to do with this. But we had two kids, and they were young, 5 and 7 years old. And she told me straight out, like, Jack, you go that way, eventually the kids will become Jehovah's Witnesses. They'll get baptized. And the moment they get married and move out of the house, you'll never see them again. Right. And I was like, she wasn't threatening me. She was just telling me.
So is your wife out?
Eventually she woke up and we both faded, but it took some time. It took a lot of effort, for her to, because I did all the wrong things. You know what I mean? Like, thanks to your book, I learned some skills. Thanks to talking to other people, I learned what to do, what not to do. And, she herself started doing some research. And once you start doing research, then it's fine. But
Right.
initially, like, she put up a fight.
Yeah, of course she did.
Most
No, I
people
mean,
do.
the thing about mind control cults is if you understand the indoctrination of what the belief system is and what the structure is, you can predict with 90% or higher accuracy what any response is going to be with
Right.
a fully indoctrinated person. So the key then comes down to how creative are you and flexible are you?
Hmm.
And how
So
well and have you done your homework on yourself?
let's run a couple of scenarios. Let's say you're married to somebody who is still in the religion, but you have
I
kids.
don't like calling it a religion. I feel like it's validating them in a way that does not work for me. How would you feel if I say, when you talk to someone in the moon religion or in the Scientology
Right. Yeah. He
religion,
actually
would
downplayed it.
you go,
Yeah.
yeah, Scientology religion, or if you know anything about Scientology or the
Right.
moon?
I do. Yeah.
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 So
Okay.
anyway,
So let's say
forgive me for interrupting you, John.
your spouse is saying, you know what, don't talk to our kids, about the stuff that you're learning because you're gonna mess them up, right? What would you say?
So you're asking me a question that's out of context of a million other things.
Okay.
I,
Sorry.
I
Maybe I
can
wasn't.
answer it, but it's not going to be a good answer because there's so many other variables.
Well, to clarify, and that was the situation in my home. So I woke up and my wife didn't. So she says, don't talk to the kids about the stuff that you're learning because you're gonna mess up. You've been teaching them one way for X amount of years. All of a sudden, you're gonna tell them it's all a lie. You're gonna mess them
So
up.
what would I say? So the first thing I would coach people to say is, let me see if I got this right. You're telling me that because I raised the kids in the watchtower, and told them what to do, they have these set of beliefs, and you believe that if I start talking with them about what I've learned about the group, that it's going to mess them up. Is that correct?
Right. It doesn't make sense,
Right.
but for a person who's
No. But
a
the
believer.
point is, repeating back or mirroring back that you were actually
Oh,
listening
I
to
got you.
what they were saying is a very important rapport and trust building thing. And I'm not just saying do it as a technique. I'm saying listen to it.
Oh,
Listen
that's a
to
very
what is
wonderful one.
being said, repeat it back, and
To
see
them.
if the person says, no, that's not exactly it. Please tell me it again. And it may change a little the next time. And it may change a little bit more the time after that. And
Right.
these little shifts for someone who is like me, this is my specialty. You pick up on these little shifts and you see movement happening in the right direction,
Mm,
right? And if someone's been in a group for 30 years from childhood, don't expect, in a week that they're going to be, okay, I'm done, I'm out,
right. Right.
because their spouse. Now, the advantage in a way that you had, Jack, is the cult that you were in, that most people here, actually including the Mormons, it's a patriarchal cult where the guys have more power than the women.
Okay.
So
That is true. Yes.
so that there's a power differential
Mhm.
thing, but that makes it harder for women who wake up first
Right.
to correct their husbands. By the way,
Yeah.
I've learned some really interesting things.
It is harder for women. Absolutely.
So, but on a mediation level, if somebody was saying to me, "Don't talk to the kids about your doubts," it opens up the door to saying, "Okay, if I don't do that, will you agree not to talk to the kids about the group
Mm,
and influence the kids towards the group?"
right.
Because then you can negotiate a period of time. Say, let's try it for a week, or let's try it for a month. You know what I mean? But you're
Oh yeah.
making
Absolutely.
you're making
Absolutely.
behavioral shifts. And if you understand cognitive dissonance theory, changing someone's behavior will change their beliefs, their thoughts, and their feelings about things.
Right. Right. I think one of the hardest cases that I spoke with is, let's say, a father wakes up, they're divorced. He gets the kids only for a weekend or every second weekend, and he's got this short window to talk to the kids, and of course the wife or ex-wife is very strongly opposing. She's taking the kids to the meetings and preaching door to door and stuff
No,
like that.
I know it very well. So you know about parental alienation literature?
No, not yet.
So I invite everybody to come to my website, freedomofmind.com, look up Jehovah's Witnesses, Watchtower. I've done a ton of blogs on that. My webmaster is an ex-JW, by the way,
Hmm.
and her husband is John Redwood, Mark O'Donnell. So
Oh,
Kimmy
really?
Kimmy is my webmaster. So we get a lot of extra ex-JW related stuff on my blog, which I'm happy to do. But I lost my train of thought. What was I just about to say?
Or the parental thing?
Oh, parental alienation. Yeah. So I
Parental.
have at least 2 blogs about parental alienation. With cults, they always want the children to stay in and indoctrinate them.
Of course.
So if there's one of the parents, the husband or the wife, who is questioning, they'll be kicked out, or the person will exit, and there'll be a battle, and the person who's still in will be indoctrinating, and they'll indoctrinate them that daddy or mommy are gone to hell, possessed by demons, whatever.
Yes.
So that's my introduction to parental alienation from the Moonies when I got out of that. But there's a whole area worldwide of just plain a husband and wife divorcing, no religion thing or cult thing,
Right.
but one of them's a narcissist and
Mm,
programs the kids against the other parent and wants
right.
custody and control, and even will make up stories that the wife, you know, raped them or beat them or all kinds of other nonsense. But there's a whole body of literature and knowledge about parental alienation.
Hmm. I gotta look at.
um, so I've done cases where they've divorced and there was this alienation and indoctrination, and I've still been able to, over time, help the non-member to get to the kids. It almost well, certainly when they become 18, it makes it easier to have access to them. And since the internet happened in the mid 90s, that also opened up doors for how to influence kids indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like I said at the beginning of this, for me as a specialist, I want to look at each case. What are the inherent strengths and weaknesses? You know, are there aunts, uncles, next door neighbors, coaches, teachers? Who can I involve to build a strategic team to do this process to empower the person to think for themselves and exit? So it's not a one person like the husband or the wife trying to get the other one out, but it involves a lot of other personalities.
That's a very good point.
And I call it the strategic interactive approach. Now, one universal is, as you were saying at the beginning, Jack, you were in a cult, Steve, you were in the Moonies, but I wasn't in a cult. That's a universal. So what I've learned over the decades is the way to help someone in the watchtower is not to talk about what's wrong with the watchtower first, but to talk about another group that person would say, oh, that's a cult.
Oh,
Like, have you heard of Nexium?
yes, I did.
One
Yeah.
with the branding,
Yeah. The branding, the
where
guy's
the guy
name.
was convicted of trafficking,
Right.
or the FLDS with
That one.
Warren Jeffs and the Child Brides, or David Koresh, or Jim Jones, or the Mormon prepper cult, the
Right.
Daybells that's in the media right now. So the idea is educating the person that you're trying to influence about other groups, and then you work your way into a discussion involving the bite model. Does everybody know what the bite model is?
Most people do, but maybe just quickly, tell us what it is.
So it's on my website. It stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And there are all these variables that I've summarized. And the more your group does all of these things, the more destructive mind controlling it is.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
But you don't start with the group you're trying to help the person out of. You want them to understand that there is such a thing as brainwashing. There is such a thing as a destructive. Let's look at how these intelligent, educated people have been manipulated to do things like pouring cyanide-laced flavor aid down their children's mouths
Right.
because God told them to.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Right? So again, it's about education in a sense. It's about empowering people to have some self esteem of their real self, and not just validating that they can parrot, what the watchtower says, and answer the questions, every week. So I'm looking at the clock, and we only have 7 minutes left.
Right.
What else do you want to know? We haven't
You know
given other
what? Yeah,
people a
let's
chance to ask questions yet.
yeah, let's open the floor to everybody who wants to ask a question. I'm gonna unmute yourself if you have a question.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kim.
Hey, Stephen. I was wondering what your thoughts are about what appears to be a global, all of the same things that are going on, talking about, controlling everybody's behavior. We're all in a lockdown. Our thoughts are all being controlled. We're all expected and asked to do things that maybe we don't believe in. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about that. There's a lot of...
Are you asking about the COVID virus?
Yes, absolutely. Because there's a huge division about what people believe and what people are being told. Not everybody believes what they've been told. And those who have done enough research know that the media is controlled by 4 corporations.
5.
Anyway, not very many. And these are all part of this controlling force that's growing, that's on the planet.
Yeah, this is a longer conversation than we can have possibly here, but I do want to state categorically that I do believe in expertise. I do believe in the scientific method. I do believe in modern medicine. Although doctors make mistakes and scientists make mistakes, it's part of a community that does error correction, detection and correction. And there's a huge amount of disinformation that's being spread to make people distrust doctors and experts, and people don't know how to think about information that they're getting, and there's a whole course that's needed to understand how to think critically and how to look at credible sources versus bots or Putin or cults that are involved with governments around the world. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, just because we don't have a lot of time.
I get your viewpoint. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question. I guess I'm not on. Hello?
Yeah, Gary, go
I
ahead.
can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. About someone who is an XJW and is therefore convinced that they're free and control and emotional control is either drifting towards other beliefs.
I'm having trouble hearing you, unfortunately.
I can hear you, Gary.
So let's shift to someone that I can hear.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Danielle. So I'm a coach and I want to be working with Jehovah's Witnesses more, but I'm finding my biggest obstacle is trying to break myself free from the collective. Anything that I want to share or, want to express like my own experience, I filter everything through, how I would have received that when I was in, and I'm like making people's minds up for them and kind of figuring this isn't going to resonate with them. I would never have listened to this, what I would have thought about myself if I was hearing someone else say what I'm saying. And I'm just, it's been a couple of years at this point. I feel like I've made progress, but I still find myself kind of falling back into that.
Yeah, it's going back to the beginning of this call where I said you really need to put the effort in to help heal yourself first.
Right.
And you really don't want to have a witness self and an authentic self. You want to just have an authentic self, knowing that the younger you had been in the witnesses.
And I definitely do know that. And my way of leaving was more kind of intellectual, where I was able to, from just being away for a couple of months, honestly, circumstantially, was able to just recognize, like, if it wasn't drilled into my head constantly, I didn't believe in shunning, and, certain things didn't make sense. So I had this desire to share with everyone what I learned. It was just my own belief, and I walked away kind of
Yeah.
quietly.
It's much more complex if you're if you're positioning yourself as a helper of other people.
Yep.
There's just a lot I've spent endless amounts of hours and money getting trained on how to listen, how to understand different people's mindsets, the different types of problems and issues. And it is not something that's a quickie thing that you can do a quick formula,
Right.
unfortunately. But the bottom line for me is really paying attention and doing your homework. So, for example, you were raised in the witnesses or you weren't?
I was.
You were. So, why did you leave? What exactly? What was the point that you
So
said enough?
I was raised from birth, got married in it, left my husband at 38, had nothing to do with the religion, but just through the process of the divorce and people not knowing what was going on, I didn't feel like I could walk into the Kingdom Hall, because people are like, how are you doing
Right.
with your
It
husband?
was more social
So
social influence thing going on. Did you have kids with your husband?
no, but meeting people out in the world and realizing, like, oh my gosh, like, these people are really nice, started kind of that,
Right.
process.
So, do you know what you believe now?
In what context? I mean, that's a broad.
Uh, like when I'm working with clients, if they say, and I'm very reluctant to get into my personal beliefs, but if they push me, I have a very coherent, well researched, well thought out, belief system about what the world is about and why we're here and all of that.
I mean, as it relates to what I was raised with and what they're in, I mean, the differences at this point are, from what I had learned and had drilled into my head about what God was and what God was like, it didn't line up with so many of the teachings. And
No, I understand.
yeah,
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
sure.
But I guess my question to you is, if you do a thought experiment of if I was never raised in a cult and I was like raised in a regular, normal, healthy, family,
Right.
who would I be and what would I believe?
Yeah.
Like that, because it sounds like you're using the witnesses and what you don't like about the witnesses as your center of gravity for who you are versus who you are as someone who had been in the witnesses.
I think I was just looking at it as I would need to do that to give them a reference point. But for me, it's just very simple, of family and love of people. And that's who I am. I know that's who I am at my core, probably why it appealed to me all my life being in it. But I think I'm thinking I need to put everything in a context of the witnesses to help them understand, which I think I need to stop.
Yeah, and I guess what helps people to get out of cults was reading my book when it had nothing to do with their group.
Right.
And just learning the psychology of influence and what is brainwashing and understanding the patterns.
Yeah.
And I keep hearing from people who read the book who've been involved with groups that I've never heard of, but it resonates with them in a way that tells them, you know what, this is too much like this unhealthy thing,
Right.
this cult group, right? So I would just encourage you to do some more healing and some more self work.
Okay. Thank you.
Jack, where are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, no, I'm hearing. Thank you very much, Steve. I can't express enough how grateful I am that you agreed to this. Hopefully, this is not our last one. I know more people will have tons of more questions. Maybe they can post them on Facebook, and we'll get together maybe one more time, sometimes in the future. We'll have more things to do. But tell us quickly how, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, use your service or anything like that, how can they get a hold of you?
I would encourage you, come to freedomofmind.com and start exploring. Just start going down the menus, go to the blogs, do a search for Watchtower, and I have a blog on physically in, mentally out. I have another blog on mentally in, physically out. I have all
Yeah.
kinds of different angles, and learn about other cults, because you'll say to yourself, this is just like my group, or this isn't anything like my group, and you can start developing patterns of
Mm-hmm.
what fits for you. But I want to encourage all of your folks that are on this and in your group. The goal is to be in your body, not dissociated. Be in your body, in the here and now, with an internal locus of control, not looking to some authority figure to tell you what
Mm-hmm.
reality is or what you need to do with your life. Be your own authority figure, right? And you want to have a positive future orientation. So if you're not in your body, learn how to get into your body. If you're finding yourself triggered into the past a lot, especially to trauma, you need to learn mind control techniques on how to heal yourself.
Mm.
Because the trauma happened in the past, it's not now. If it's intruding into the now, that's fixable.
Very good point. Very good.
And you want to have a positive future orientation. I did a blog 2 weeks ago about how, the pandemic is triggering lots of people in the Watchtower and other cults, that Armageddon is coming.
Right.
Well, in the Moonies, 1977 was Armageddon, was 1977. And then they keep making other dates,
Yeah.
of course, as it goes along. But, there are thousands and thousands of cults that say, only if you're with us will you be saved. All the other ones, you're toast.
Right.
Like, you need to use your brain and go, wait a minute. If
Yeah.
there are 10,000 cults and one of them is right, my odds are lousy that I picked the right one the first time.
That's a
And
good point. Yeah.
right, you really, which is what I believe, none of the cults are correct.
Right.
Just know that things are screwed up right now, but we're living in an amazing time. People used to live to be 30 years old as the average.
Yeah.
Like, people are living to 100 now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of miraculous, wonderful things going on. And I definitely encourage people to be very careful how much media consumption they have, and to stay away from conspiracy theories and disinformation campaigns, and do fact check a lot before you share anything, because there's so much nonsense that's being circulated as facts. And you've heard about deep fakes?
Nope.
Have you heard about deep fakes, Jack?
No.
Deep fakes are, you can do a video now that looks completely real, that's completely artificial. It's completely fake.
Huh.
And if you look up deep fakes and look at videos, you can see demos, and the software is so inexpensive, anyone can make them now. So
Oh, wow.
you can see, George Washington selling orange juice and it's completely George Washington's face, and the
Wow.
mouth's moving and the eyes are moving, and it looks like he's alive,
Right.
and it's not real.
Wow.
So
No,
we have
that's
to
a
be
lot of
extremely
misinformation.
careful as we go forth, especially with the internet, where we don't even know who we're being influenced by.
Right. Right. And yeah, double checking information. I know myself, I became a victim of a lot of misinformation. I believe the whole world's going to end in 2008 because of the
Yep.
financial crisis. And I swallowed a lot of conspiracy theories. I thought it's going to be hyperinflation all over the world. I believe that very strongly. And then, I had to educate myself on how to think critically, to evaluate the information in order to find out what is real, what is not.
Yep. So I will say that there are such things as real conspiracies, but there's actual facts that back up those claims. I'm a dinosaur. I have a 44-year track record consistently saying the same message. I keep learning more, but
Right.
it's the same message, and it's all about freedom and human rights, and people should choose for themselves. I have no agenda other than helping people heal and be functional and get out of mind control.
Wow.
So I'll say goodnight to
Yeah.
everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you very much, Stephen. We're
Thank
going to
you.
finish up this. You are a wonderful soul, and you're a great gift to many. I don't even know how many people you helped, but just with this one interview, I'm sure you helped a lot of people, and we want to thank you for that.
I hope so. Take care,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you very much, my friend.